Could the Dallas Cowboys trade up early in the 2022 NFL Draft? And if so, who might they be targeting? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms, and today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out at McCoolBCB. Landon, let's start with this. If the Cowboys trade up early in the 2022 draft, will you be surprised?
I mean, I think if you had told me that a week or two ago, yes, I would have been surprised. I think no, let me backtrack. I would have been surprised if they traded in the first round, up in the first round. That would have been surprising. I think the idea of them trading up potentially in the second round isn't surprising because I think if you kind of look through some of the mock drafts that have been done, some of the simulations that I'm sure all of us have done, there is definitely a spot where it feels like you're really kind of holding your breath going to that 56 pick, that if you were able to execute just even a small trade up, that your options would be better. I mean, maybe even significantly better at the positions that you're kind of looking to target, no matter whether you picked a guard or a wide receiver in the first round. So I think from the second round trade up, I think that's something that has been kind of in the back of my mind for a while. Now with this John Machota story, it sounds like a little bit more that trading up might be something that the Cowboys are considering in the first round specifically.
Yeah, the Cowboys are putting a lot in this draft, right? They really didn't do anything in free agency other than sign Dante Fowler and James Washington, and those guys are on one-year deals, basically placeholders for until we get to the draft. So they need this draft class to produce. That's why it's a little bit surprising that John Machota at The Athletic had an article saying he fully expects the Cowboys to trade up early in this draft because Jerry Jones wants an elite player, right? They want a CeeDee Lamb or a Micah Parsons, somebody that they graded at the very top of the positional group, somebody that can come in and start right away and be a productive player. Sounds like that's what the Cowboys are chasing. So today, Landon, we're going to be looking at some trades or some trade options in both the first and the second round. Let's start with round one. If the Cowboys do trade up, is there a specific position that you think they would be interested in getting?
I mean, I have to think wide receiver, or maybe if they really feel like they needed it, offensive tackle. Just simply, and I'm really basing the offensive tackle thing simply on the idea that it still is a little bit of a head scratcher that you see Cross listed on as one of their 30 visits, right? Because it just doesn't kind of add up that he would make it down to where the Cowboys are picking. I mean, we have seen some other mock drafts that have kind of shown that he gets within striking distance. But I just because his name kind of sticks out like a sore thumb on the 30-day visit list, I would say that maybe he's a target. But outside of that, kind of little hint or clue, I would say it's got to be wide receiver, right? Because I just don't think that there's that many guards that are worth trading up for, unless you're talking about a small trade up to like secure Zion Johnson or something like that. I don't imagine that they're going to trade up for, a defensive end. Maybe someone like Jordan Davis. Maybe they trade up for Jordan Davis because they feel like he's a rare prospect and there isn't a lot of options, defensive tackle later in the draft that are like that appealing. But I'm kind of scrambling to find positions because to me, wide receiver is the one that kind of stands out.
All right, well, let's go through this because I actually have some names I wanted to talk about. Receiver. Do you see anybody in this wide receiver class that is worth giving up an additional pick for? Because in my opinion, the answer is no. I think all of them would be good picks at 24, but I don't see anybody in this class that's near CeeDee Lamb as as a prospect. I don't see anybody like a Jalen Waddle. I feel like these are all guys that should be picked in the second half in the first round, and that's just not that appealing for me to give up pick 56 or 88 or whatever to go get one of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of should refine a little bit what we're talking about, right? Because if we're talking about moving up 2 or 3 picks, that's one thing. But if we're
I
talking
don't
about
think I don't think that's what John was talking about. John Machota. Yeah, my guess is if you're moving up, it's to go get somebody that you grade as a top 10 player in this class, right? I
so then if that's the case, then like what? Like if we're talking about wide receiver, we're talking about Drake London, Garrett Wilson, maybe
and I don't
I mean,
see any of those guys being. I like them. I just don't see any of those
yeah.
guys being worthy of giving up. Let's say 56 to go get. Right.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like if that's what we're talking about, then I mean, maybe the position is not offensive line or wide receiver. Like maybe it is something like Jordan Davis, who's a rare player, a rare
Maybe.
prospect. I can't. I just logistically, I have a hard time seeing it being anyone outside of
I got
of,
one
of
name for
offensive
you
line
on
or
the
wide
offensive
receiver.
line.
Okay.
I saw one mock today, and I can't remember exactly where it was from, where Evan Neal fell to pick 12. Okay.
Wow.
Now, it, typically, and we'll get to this when we talk about trading in the second round, I don't think the Cowboys would trade up for a guard only. I just don't see that. I don't even know if they would do that in the second round. I don't know if they would give up multiple picks to get a left guard only. However, if you're getting somebody like Evan Neal, who has guard experience and was an All American at guard, with the idea that, hey, when Tyron's done or when Tyron's hurt, we can slide him from left guard to left tackle, that becomes really appealing. And I could see why a move from 24 to 12 would make some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting name for sure, especially if the idea is that you play him at guard a little bit until he, sort of the Tyler Smith kind of route that we were discussing earlier,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
I think that certainly makes sense. I think to me, if it's a trade up, it's got to be likely for an offensive lineman or for a wide receiver or, like I said, a rare prospect who's at a position where there isn't a lot of stock inside this draft class. So that certainly fits ticks all the boxes, right? You immediately get help on your offensive line at guard. You solidified the position, the left tackle position for the future when Smith leaves.
Mhm.
I think you give yourself the the modern version of Flozell Adams, the kitchen as they or the
Yep.
the fridge, like version of that the modern day. So I think there is value in that, and I certainly would be thrilled to have a guy like Evan Neal on the team. That's for sure. I think it very much is going to hinge on what are you giving up, not only pick wise, but opportunity wise, player wise to get in the second. What are you getting? Could you get in the second round? Could you potentially then also flip your third round for a proven wide receiver, maybe, and do
Potentially.
something like that? Yeah.
So just going off the trade value chart, it would probably cost the Cowboys their first round pick, a second round pick, and one of your fifth round picks to go from 24 to 12. I think I would do that for Evan Neal though. If you're telling me I feel my biggest need at left guard and I get a guy that could potentially be a tackle down the road, I'm doing that.
Yeah, a good tackle too. Like,
A
I mean,
good tackle.
I
Yeah.
think this is a guy that could be a very good tackle soon. So, yeah, I mean, I think most teams are actually looking at him as starting at tackle,
Left
right?
tackle. Yep.
So, yeah, I definitely think that this is a guy that kind of fits that mold. He's sort of rare in that situation because you're not going to be able to do that with Cross. You're not going to be able to do
No.
that with some of these
No.
other guys. If he specifically falls to a point where you can get him, and then you have this kind of in place to move him to guard with the tackle down the road, I like that plan, and I think you could probably you got to find a way to make the wide receiver situation work, and that's going to be the next part of that conversation is how do you kind of make yourself comfortable with the rest of your roster after kind of giving away assets to go up and get Evan Neal.
All right. So one more. What about Kayvon Thibodeau? I've seen multiple mocks now where he falls outside of the top 10 into that 12, 13 range. If you want to get another pressure player and somebody that you can pair with DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons, and you get an elite pass rusher there, is that intriguing enough for you to give up your second round pick?
That's a big swing, man. I mean, that's a real boomer bust situation because Thibodeau, if he's falling out of the top 10, there's reasons for that, right? Like, I mean, I think there's questions about how much he loves football. I mean, I think it's mostly just
It's nonsense, I
people
think.
not understanding the kids these days is what knows what that is more than anything. But I would say that there. I mean, listen, there still is some risk there, and I would say the difference too is that you're taking a risk at a position where you don't necessarily need to draft an edge player to get to yourself to a good spot at the position, right? And you're still leaving yourself open at
Yes,
guard and wide receiver while having given up extra picks to go up and get this guy.
it's
So
true. But at the same time,
if he hits, it's
if it
unbelievable. If he hits,
hits, it can completely change your defense, right?
absolutely.
If you've got Thibodeau, Parsons, and DeMarcus Lawrence as your trio of playmakers in your front seven, all of a sudden we're having a completely different conversation about the Cowboys, the franchise, the direction of the defense. Because that would be very intriguing for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's a very big boomer bust thing because if Thibodeau is lackadaisical or just it doesn't fit or it doesn't work out, now you've wasted your first round pick. You've traded us away a second round pick, and you did so without ever addressing the two spots you
Mhm.
really have needs for. So it's a big swing of the stick with big, obviously, results. But even if everything goes well, like Thibodeau works and he's a fantastic player, you still have holes that you're going to have to figure out a way to fill without your first and second round pick. And you now, instead of having just one hole, having filled the other one with either Evan Neal or another offensive lineman, you've got two holes and you've got two less of your best
Sure.
assets to fill them. So it's that would be tough.
It's risky for sure. However, I could see a case with the Cowboys where they come out of this draft and saying, "Hey, we graded Thibodeau as the best player in this class. He got to
Sure.
12, and it was just too much value for us not to go up and get him. We believe with Dan Quinn coaching him, having him in our scheme where he can just tee off and go get the quarterback, he's a perfect fit." I know there's some concerns about, I don't even know how to say this, but like his brand and all that kind of off the
Yeah.
field stuff. I mean, that's the appeal to the Cowboys is right, is you can build your brand. So maybe it wouldn't be an awful fit, with somebody like Dan Quinn. I could just see that one paying off in a big way where you all of a sudden you get a top 5 pass rusher and it only cost you pick 24 and 56.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, there are definitely things that you're going to have to work out. But if it could be a huge hit for you, and if you can, get comfortable with the rest of your roster and find a way to solve the rest of your roster while doing this, you've greatly improved your defensive roster and probably put yourself in striking distance of having one of the best defenses in the league.
Yeah. I mean, if you have Thibodeau on this defense next year, probably have a better defense than what you had at any point last year, right? Because I love Randy Gregory, but Thibodeau is just a more talented, better overall player. So something to keep an eye on. I want to talk about trading up in the second round and what the Cowboys could potentially do, Lena. But before we do
Mhm.
that, let's tell you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports development, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information needs, including live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. I actually believe the Cowboys are more likely to trade up in the second round because it
Me
just
too.
makes it seems like it's more palatable to do this, right? If you have one specific guy that you really like or whatever, they've got the draft picks to do that. The
Well,
question
well,
is, go ahead.
just simply trade into where the there's more stock, right? Trade
Sure.
into where the value is better. I think that's the issue with trading up into the first round is that everyone, The one benefit you could get from trading into the first round is that it might be cheaper this year than normally because
Yes.
no one wants to trade into the first round. So you might be able to get up there for cheaper than you normally would. But I would say that the general thought is that you should trade into a spot where there's the most value, and that's really where a trade up in the second round makes the most sense, don't you think?
Yeah, so if you trade picks 56 and 88 on the trade value chart, that puts you up to about 41, 40. And you might even be able to go up a little bit higher than that if you add in a couple fifth round picks. But we've seen them do this before. We've seen them go up and get Sean Lee. We've seen them go up and get DeMarcus Lawrence. They are not afraid to trade up in the top part of the second round to get somebody that they either have, the last guy in a tier or somebody they had a first round grade on. So who are the names? What are the positions? Because I don't feel like guard is a position they would trade up for. What do you think?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, I think, Tyler Smith is someone that they could potentially trade up there because he kind of falls into that range in most of these picks. They clearly like him. And then much like the kind of Evan Neal situation that you just discussed, right? Like you get a guard who gives you some guard snaps and then eventually moves out to tackle, and then you get another guard, right?
Mhm.
I think that, if they pick wide receiver in round one, I think you can get some guys at guard at 56 that will be good value there, but not necessarily a bunch of guys like you mentioned that you want to trade up for, right? Like, I
Right.
mean, you talk about Samerly or whatever, the guard from Georgia. Uh,
Sawyer. Yeah.
Sawyer, sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
and some of those guys that you feel like are good fits, that kind of at 56. But I think if you're looking to trade up, I would say that it might the scenario that to me that makes the most sense is when you draft like Zion Johnson or Green at 24, and then you're trading up to try to get uh, I mean, any Sky,
Guy
you
Moore.
trade up to
Yep.
try to get, the Penn State
Yep.
guy, or so I think
Dotson.
that there,
Yep.
yeah, there are some guys that like, if you're looking to trade up from 56, the wide receiver specifically market, and this kind of goes back to what we've been talking about, right? Like the sequencing usually points to it being a better situation to draft a guy, a wide receiver at 24, because by 56 a lot of those wide receivers have have made
Sure.
their run and they're gone. If you're trying to trade up before that run happens, 40, 41 might be a good spot to
Yeah.
do it. You can still get one of those back end of the first round wide receivers and be happy.
I also think there's a chance that they could trade up for a position that maybe we haven't really highlighted. Like, my gut tells me, Landon, that they're not going to draft wide receiver guard with their first two picks in one order. They're going to go a different direction, right? Because it seems like they always go a little bit different direction than what strictly the needs tell us, right? They're going to take somebody who they have really created highly. So if Devontae Wyatt, the defensive tackle from Georgia, is sitting at pick 36 and the Cowboys had a top 15 grade on him, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Cowboys go up and get somebody like that because he can be a pressure player, or if there's a corner that they absolutely love and they think that he is a upgrade over Kelvin Joseph, or it's a corner that can play in the slot as well. I think those are options, but I think you identified the right guy in Tyler Smith. I think that's a guy that I could see them saying, hey, yes, he's a left guard for us in year one, but he could potentially be our left tackle down the road. That's why we're more comfortable trading for him rather than Kenyon Green, who's probably just a left guard in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is something to the idea that Kenyon Green obviously has played all those spots at a very high level at the SEC, but I think as far as where you want them in the NFL, can you put Kenyon Green out at right tackle if you need to? Yeah, maybe
Probably.
so. But would you want him there for like more than just a sub in for the game? Maybe not.
Right.
Maybe you'd rather have someone else. I think with Tyler Smith, you get a guy that has the tool set that you want to develop into a
Mhm.
starting left tackle. And while he's developing that tool set, he can mitigate some of his problems inside a guard and give you good snaps there because he is a finisher. He's a physical player. And I think that there's value there. So I tend to agree with you, actually. We kind of get into this mindset where we look at the needs that the Cowboys have, and then we look to solve the sequencing of those needs in the draft, and how do we get those guys that the Cowboys need in order to to fill these holes. And I think sometimes we do that while being a lot more myopic than the Cowboys front office is. They are considering all options, and they have more options available to them because they know what the actual options are. Like, we don't know, we're not privy to the phone calls that are made between GMs across the league. We don't know who's being shopped around at different teams. They may have a trade on the table for a player specifically that they will execute if they draft in a certain sequence that they like,
Sure.
right? Like, maybe they go out and draft a guard and they're like, okay, cool, we got the guard we want. They call up, hey, Tennessee, all right, we're ready to flip our second and or next year's second for AJ Green. I mean, so for AJ
Brown. Sure.
Brown, Green Browns.
That's an example. Right?
I never noticed that they're both AJs with different colors. But yes, that's just as an example, right? As someone who we're not fully privy to exactly who is available out in the NFL as far as for trades, whereas the GMs are. So they have kind of a different mindset. So I think that certainly is possible that something like that could be in the works where, yeah, they go and get the guy they want in the first round. They draft someone that kind of makes us scratch our head in the second round, and then day 3 we find out that they flipped a pick for a guy that is a starter or third wide receiver, or that's something we're all fine.
Or right? I think another thing that needs to be considered, the compensatory formula for free agency ends the day after the draft. And we actually saw this a couple of years ago with the Cowboys signed Daryl Worley. Now, this is a bad example of a player not working, but they had a deal in place, and they just didn't announce it until after the draft to save him from the comp formula, right? So maybe there's a defensive end out there right now. Maybe it's Melvin Ingram that they said, hey, we're going to sign you. We'll just wait until after the draft so it helps us out. We'll give you a little bit more money if you wait. Maybe they have stuff like that already lined up. I got one more player that could be interesting.
Yeah.
What if Devin Lloyd, the linebacker from Utah, is available at like 35? Could you see the Cowboys trading up and getting him and being like, you know what? This is our weak side linebacker for the next 4 years. We've got Van Der Esch at a 1-year contract. He can be the guy that can match up against tight ends for us. It's a cheap contract. And, hey, it's another front 7 player that we can move all around. He's the 30th visit for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they're certainly interested in him. I just, trading up for a linebacker.
Oh, I get it.
We've done it before, but it's just, I listen, I guess, you're not wrong. Yes, I wouldn't be surprised because the truth of the matter is they have a first-round grade on him. They clearly like him. It's, and you mentioned it before, the Sean Lee situation, right? Like they've done that before. So I wouldn't love it necessarily. But I would really only not love it because of the trade, not necessarily the pick. Right. You know what I'm saying?
But if the Cowboys came out of the first round of the first 2 days of the draft, let's say with pick your offensive guard, let's say Zion Johnson and Devin Lloyd.
That's pretty.
Those are 2 starters that you probably graded inside your top 25 players that are, pretty talented at least.
Yeah.
It's just the value in terms of the positions you're drafting isn't great. But those are highly graded players.
That's also changing too. It feels like the linebacker is a position that is actually coming back more into vogue, because of the way that teams are playing football. So now that you're playing shell coverages, you need linebackers underneath who can cover and play the run in equal measures. So suddenly you need those kind of linebackers.
And maybe the thought process is, hey, if we draft Devin Lloyd and we've got Van Der Esch this year and we've got Jabril Cox coming back from injury, those 3 combined with J-Ron Kearse probably gives us a good enough linebacker core where we can use Micah Parsons more as a pure pass rusher. So this is actually helping 2 spots. Again, would we love it? I don't know, but I could certainly see that being a possible trade up scenario for the Cowboys.
So, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think again, like, we may not love the trade, but I would love having Zion Johnson and Devin Lloyd as their first 2 picks. That would be great talent acquisition.
All right, it's another edition of a Mock Draft Monday here in the Locked On Cowboys podcast. But before we get to that, we should tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of year, almost everybody has given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us. We are sticking to ours to eat better, thanks to Built Bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, with most Built Bars only containing 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your average candy bar that has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and it's not even a contest. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Mock Draft Monday. This one comes from our guy, Eric Crocker at Locked On NFL Draft. At pick 24, he has the Dallas Cowboys selecting Kenyon Green, guard from Texas A&M. A pretty common pick that you're seeing now in mock drafts. It seems like that's the guard that a lot of people are identifying for the Cowboys. He had Zion Johnson going to New England, just a couple spots ahead of them. Kenyon Green, if he's the pick at 24 for the Cowboys in a couple of weeks, what are your thoughts?
I like Kenyon Green. I think if he's the pick at 24, you're happy with. Look, again, and I think we talked about this last year too. There have been years before where the Cowboys, you assess the Cowboys draft situation and you don't love where their floor could be. Meaning, you don't love where the worst case scenario happens to you, and you feel nervous that it's kind of a gambit of picks you have to make it through in order to get even a decent pick. I think for the Cowboys this year, you see more and more the guys that are drafted regularly and for the Cowboys are all very solid options for them. And I think Kenyon Green represents kind of the floor for that pick. But again, I don't mean that in a negative connotation. I think that Kenyon Green is a good, solid player. He would fit exactly what they need as a guard, in the fact that he's a stout player who moves his feet well. He stays on blocks. He buries folks. I think he can give you some snaps outside if you needed him to. So I think we've kind of talked about a lot sexier picks at times. We've talked about guys that maybe we would hope would fall to us, or we've talked about the sequencing and about how drafting a wide receiver in the first round may help you a little bit further down the draft and getting what you need. But I also think that we shouldn't be throwing our pins at all if Kenyon Green is the pick. He's a solid pick. He's a guy that will come in and give you a lot of what you were lacking as far as girth and strength up in the middle at the guard position. And I think that those are things that will make an immediate impact on this offense. And hopefully not only just help in the run game, but obviously give Dak a more stout pocket and more time to throw the football.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a really smart pick. The Cowboys love drafting offensive tackles and kind of moving them into guard, right? And I know Green played a lot of guard in college as well, but that's one thing that they really care about is guys that have the feet to play tackle in college, who they can move inside of the NFL and still have really good feet. Between Zach Martin, Lyle Collins, Connor Williams was a tackle at Texas. David Arkin, way back in the day. I know that one didn't work out, but they love college offensive tackles that can move in the guard. I think the only difference here is they don't have to worry about power issues. Like Connor Williams clearly needed to get stronger. It's not really an issue with Kenyon Green. I mean, he's going to be NFL ready day one when it comes to power. So I like Zion a little bit better, but would not complain at all about Kenyon Green at 24. I'd be actually very, very happy with that pick.
Yeah, again, I agree. I think I would prefer Zion Johnson, but I think that, what the message I'd like to get out there is that just because we prefer Zion Johnson doesn't mean we wouldn't be thrilled with Green, because I absolutely would. And I think he'd be a great fit for the Cowboys.
It kind of reminds me last year, like we really liked Patrick Surtain, both you and I, but we would have been fine if they took JC Horn at 10, right? Like they were both really good players at the same position. We just had a preference, but both guys are going to be good corners. Now, Cowboys didn't get either one of those guys, and I think they're okay. But
they ended up getting the guy that you were the most afraid about getting, if I remember correctly. But it ended up working out okay.
Yeah, I was very, very afraid because I mean, we don't have to talk about this. But
we don't have to get into that whole thing. But look, part of the problem with how and again, just as a kind of cautionary tale for this, right, is especially last year, and especially with a guy like Micah Parsons, we weren't privy to a ton of the information that was there. No. We didn't have there very little college tape. We weren't aware necessarily of all that he could do as a pass rusher. The coaches had a lot more insight there than the media folks did, because of the year off, of a lot of
Yeah.
different things. So
And you wonder how much would Micah been used as an edge rusher if DeMarcus Lawrence didn't get hurt in week 1 and Randy Gregory didn't miss week 2 because of was it COVID at the time, right? Like they kind of locked it. I don't want to say like that's the wrong word, but I'm
yeah,
not sure they knew what they had as a full-time edge rusher with Micah Parsons yet.
I think they may have known that they wanted to do that because clearly, even very early on in training camp, they were looking at him as a pass rusher, and
As a
they
pass
talked
rusher,
about him as a pressure player. But would they have actually put him on the field and thought that he was ready to do it? Probably not. Not without the
Yeah.
injuries that kind of played and forced him into that role. Was it week 2? I think was
Yeah,
really when it
it would
started.
be it would be a little bit like the Cowboys drafting Tyler Smith with the plan of him being at left guard, and all of a sudden they have to start him at left tackle because Tyron
Yeah,
Smith gets and he dominates, right? That would be that kind of surprise. But overall, we'd be very happy with Kenyon Green at 24. I think at that point we start looking into day 2 and seeing maybe what receiver they could move up for, right?
I agree. Yeah, maybe it's whether they got to move up to 40 like we just talked about to get a wide receiver. Waiting to 56 seems pretty dangerous, especially with the way these wide receivers seem
You're
to
not
fly
gonna
off
do
the
that.
board in
Yeah.
these. But I would say either that or flipping a pick for an established guy. That would probably be either one of those have been great solutions.
Would you trade up for like George Pickens or Sky Moore or any of those guys?
I'd probably trade up for Sky Moore, maybe. I don't know about Pickens. I think I like Pickens, and I think that Pickens will be a good NFL wide receiver. But I would rather him fall to me at 56 than having to give up extra picks for someone like that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think Sky Moore's a little bit more. It's weird. I think he's probably more of a slot receiver, which I feel like Dallas might need a little bit more. Somebody who's dynamic in the middle of the field. So I would not be surprised if the Cowboys consider either of those, or maybe Dotson from Penn State is somebody that
Yep,
they trade up for.
absolutely.
We'll see. All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribers have been going through the roof there. We're going to try to get to 5,000 before the draft. I know that's a big ask, but help us out on YouTube. We want to get to 5,000 here over the next couple of weeks. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.